Today I'll be giving you a general overview of our Consew 226R. This is an industrial walking foot machine that is a very popular and common choice in upholstery shops. We have a lamp up here that I'm just going to push out of the way today so that you can see everything we're talking about. The entire part that we generally refer to as the sewing machine is actually called the head, and it can be tipped back for cleaning, for maintenance. It can even be lifted out for transport, but it lives inside our table, and underneath you'll see a foot pedal that we'll use to drive, a knee pedal that's used to lift our foot, and underneath is our motor, which on here we have a clutch motor, which means it doesn't regulate speed terribly well, and it makes a little bit of noise when we turn it on. So you'll hear that in a little bit when we get to sewing. Now for thread, since this is an upholstery machine, you do want to use an upholstery specific thread. Our go-to is a nylon 69. It's a nice, strong, versatile thread that's going to work well for upholstery. And I'm going to thread the machine, and then I'm going to point out a few places in particular to be aware of. And then left to right on the needle. Okay, so that is the thread pattern here. Now let's back up, and I want to show you a few places to be aware of here. If we go all the way up to the thread stand, you can see we have a little bit of tape in this one, we have some fabric in that one, and that is just, as we get going, the thread does like to pop out of there sometimes, so you see different solutions in different work rooms. We've just closed the gap. Sometimes people will double loop their thread, but that's just to keep the thread in our stand. If we come on down here, the next thing I want to show you is this thread guide right here. You will see different patterns threaded there. Sometimes people come down and go down and go down. Sometimes they'll skip that middle loop entirely. This is sort of what your machine likes. This is as the manual shows it, but other ways work too, and it can affect slightly how your tension works on your machine. Now I want to show you these two in particular are the most common places that our students run into trouble, because let me pop this out and we're going to rethread that. These are responsible for your tension, so when I go around here, I need to make sure that the thread actually slides into the tension plate. So listen, and you could see that and maybe hear that sort of snap into those plates there. If it's not in there, if it's just loosely riding around here, you won't have any tension on the thread, and it's going to bounce out and be completely messed up. So make sure that you get it into those discs. And then down into here, this little spring, we need to make sure we catch that. As I come around here, I can't just travel up. I need to lift this thread and make sure it snaps into that spring. And I'm going to stop talking so again you can listen. And you heard that little click as it snapped into place. And that's going to keep the thread from bouncing out. So up we go again. Through my guide here. and down through this series of guides. 1, 2, 3. There's a little guide above the needle. And on the needle, I know some different machines, you might thread front to back, you might do some different things. This one goes left to right, and I want to show you, if you get in there very close on the side I came in on, you can see, hopefully, there's a very tiny little groove on the needle. And that's how you know that's where our thread comes in, because that groove is there for our thread to slide along. We also need to thread the bobbin. Now, I like pre-wound bobbins of that same nylon 69 because the tension is nice and even. This machine takes a size G, but the machine does have a bobbin winder, and I'll show you how to use that in a minute, but for now, let's keep threading. Well, this little door here, this machine has a top-loading bobbin, so this door slides open and we can see our bobbin. This little lever lifts, and then I can pull the old bobbin out. And the new bobbin, let me find my tail. This is very important. When that spool's off, you want to position it like the letter P for proper, right? Not this way. Letter P for proper, or your machine will get very angry. And that drops in, lever goes down, and this little slot here is where we will slide our thread into place. And I've given that a little tug too to make sure it slots down in there. And to pull my bottom thread up, what I'm going to do is hold my top thread. Let me get my foot up here. I'm going to hold my top thread, and over here, my hand wheel to the right, I'm going to walk that forward, and my top thread will grab my bottom thread, and I can use my little scissors or whatever to scoop that out. And now I have both my threads. Let me do that one more time so you can watch what's happening in the bobbin. I'm going to take that out. P for proper. In we go. Lever down. Thread into the slot. Oh. And then I'm going to hold the top thread. I want you to watch right here, very close. Good. I'm going to hold the thread and stay there as I turn the hand wheel. You're going to watch for the top thread, and you'll see it come around and catch my bottom thread. And it just pulls it up. So now I have both my threads. And with that door slid closed, we are officially ready to sew. Before you start in on any sewing projects, it's important that you feel comfortable with the speed and control of your machine. So to do that, I'm going to grab just a practice swatch of fabric. And I'm going to turn my machine on. That clutch motor is going to make a little bit of noise. And to lift my foot and get my fabric in here, I have two options. Down below with my knee pedal, and that's nice and convenient, but it's not going to stay up. Or if you come around to the side, you can see we have a lever in the back, and that will hold my foot up, but it's a little less convenient to get to. So either way, we'll get our fabric underneath, put our foot down, and when I start sewing on a Consew, I want to hold onto my threads for the first couple stitches. With that foot pedal down below, I'm just going to press gently. And after a few stitches, I can let my thread go. But on these industrial machines, if you don't hang on, the thread likes to wrap the bobbin casing and it can get tangled up. So hold that tight. When our machines get tangled in class, that's almost always the culprit. I can snip those if I like. And from there, I'm ready to just hold my fabric, test out my foot pedal, and see how fast she goes. If you are used to a residential machine, this is going to feel very speedy, but I promise you when you get used to it, you'll have a hard time going back, because on sofa-sized sewing, it is very, very nice to have that speed. But if I'm gentle, I can go nice and slow. And when I get down here, when I'm ready to turn my corner, on that hand wheel, I can walk my needle into position. Sometimes if you just have a couple left, that's the way to go. Needle down. With my knee pedal, I'll lift and turn my fabric so that I can change directions. Let's do that one more time. If I need to walk my needle, that's the hand wheel. Needle down, lift the foot, turn the fabric. Now when I get to the end of my seam, I might want to lock that stitch up, which I just need to reverse a few stitches to do that. And the lever over here will reverse my stitch if I take this all the way down. So I'm gonna stitch, down goes my lever, and the machine reverses. Let's do that one more time. I'm going forward, and my lever takes it backwards. So now that seam is locked and it won't unravel. In order to get this out, I'm gonna walk my needle up, lift my foot, and give this a tug. And if that feels stuck, I'll use my hand wheel and just rock it until it releases. You need to find kind of the right spot in that bobbin cycle for your thread to slide out. Now I want to show you about some of the basic adjustments on here. So let me grab a new piece and we will start again. There's a few adjustments on this machine that are going to be nice, and I'm using a dark colored thread so that you can see what's going on. The first thing to maybe know is that this right here, this is going to affect your top tension on the machine. Lefty-loosey, righty-tighty. So if you see that your top thread is too loose and it's making loops down below, or it's too tight and it's pulling your bobbin thread up, this is the kind of main adjustment for your thread tension. Right now it's pretty happy, so we're going to leave it alone. Coming around back, I want to show you an adjustment I really like on this machine, which is this wing nut right here. And you can see if you come right around here and take a peek, it's in this slot that if I loosen my wing nut, I can slide this up and down. And what that's gonna affect, come around here and take a peek, and you can see my foot pressure going down and up. This is a really nice adjustment to have. If I just have 2 layers of fabric like this, maybe I want it all the way down. If I get into 3 or 4 or 5 layers of vinyl or velvet, I might want that foot pressure all the way up so that it can pull those thicker layers through. So right now I've got the foot pressure all the way up. And it's just gonna lift a little higher. It's not gonna drive down quite so hard. And the other thing that that can do inadvertently is lengthen our stitch, which is sort of nice, because the last adjustment I want to show you here, to adjust stitch length on this machine is a little awkward. The way that we do that is we hold this button down here. I'm gonna hold that down, and my hand wheel over here will turn until this drops in, and I'll see what my stitch length is at. So let me do that. I'm gonna be quiet so you can listen. So let me turn the machine off. Okay, and my button, it just dropped down. I could feel it, and I see that I'm at about a 7. So if I go this way, it's gonna shorten my stitches. And if I go this way, it's gonna lengthen my stitches. So I'm gonna go all the way up as far as it'll go, a 5, which I wouldn't very often use a long stitch like that, but maybe on a vinyl, or if I was going to do a gathering stitch on something. Let me turn this back on and we'll see. Let me turn this around, I'm gonna change directions. So now we should have a nice long stitch. Let's try going the other way. I'll hold this down. And there it dropped in at my 5, and I'm gonna go all the way this way, and let's see what we got. And turn again. And so now I have itty bitty stitches. I'm gonna walk this up and take that out. Now one more button I just want to make you aware of. This is to adjust our stitch length. This one over here is actually like a reset button for a safety mechanism that this machine has. If your machine jams up, you get a big tangle in there, you sew over something that you shouldn't have sewed over, there is actually like a safety catch that will shut your machine down, and all of a sudden nothing will work, which is very, very scary, but it's actually a great thing because it protects all these moving parts from damage by just shutting it down. So if that happens and you're freaking out because all of a sudden nothing's working and you think you broke your machine forever, I want you to be aware that this button, and it won't do anything right now because my machine is working, it's just gonna click, doot doot doot. But if my machine was out of time, I would do what I just did with the stitch length. I'd hold this and turn my wheel until this button dropped in. Then, if you keep going and it'll feel like it's stuck, you keep going and you'll hear a great big clunk and everything will re-engage. So even though everything's working fine right now, I do want you to just be aware of what that button is for. There's lots of great YouTube videos to show you, but that's a good one to know the day that you think your machine has completely broken down on you. In case you don't want to use pre-wound bobbins, I do want to show you. So I have a metal bobbin here, and we do have a bobbin winder off to the side. So if you come around here, you can see my bobbin will just slide on. Let's make sure I got a slot right on there, and I'll come up here with a second spool of thread through the stand and down here. This threading I think is pretty obvious through the thread guide. Oh, come on. Around the tension discs to make sure it snaps in there. Won't do you much good. Snaps in. And when I get to the bobbin, I will come under and around a few times, and then where'd my slot go on the side? I'll take my tail out through the side of my bobbin. Now once that's threaded, I can push this forward and watch this will engage with the belt on my machine. Boop. So now when I sew, that will turn this and this will wind my bobbin. Let's go take a peek at that. And it's great that you can wind that bobbin while you are sewing. Once it gets going, we'll trim our thread off. And we're all set. So if you are not using pre-wound bobbins, great idea to make sure that you have double spools of the color so that you can just always keep a bobbin going and not have to stop and wind one in the middle of a project. Let's talk a little bit about feet for this machine. There's plenty of feet that you can get here, zipper feet, flat feet. What I have on here is a single welt foot, which I want to remove and show you. It is a two-part foot. The outer foot comes off with a screw. Don't lose that. And the inner foot, and then that foot drops off. So two-part foot. And let me show you in the back here how we know it's a single welt foot. These two parts join, and you can see it's got a little tunnel where my welt cord will go. Now this is the foot I use 90 times out of 100. I use it for zippers, I use it for plain seams. I rarely switch this foot off my machine. Some workrooms really like to switch to flat feet, to zipper feet. It's not uncommon for upholstery workrooms to just use this as sort of a general purpose foot. The other couple feet I have in my drawer. I have a double welt foot, but this one you can see has two little tunnels so that I can sew right between two pieces of welt cord. And the last one that I have here is a top stitch foot. And this one is a little different. You can see it's got this kind of spring-loaded guide here, which will follow a folded seam nicely so your needle can stitch neatly alongside it. This is a newer foot for us, and it's a little bit of a bonus foot. You definitely can get away without it, but if you do a lot of top stitching, it really is a nice way to make sure that you stay even with a little less effort. You can get it in a variety of offsets, and you can also get this guide for the other side, just depending on what you're doing, but it's only about $25 a set, so it is a nice little add-on if you do lots of that. In terms of maintenance, the most important things are that you keep your machine clean and oiled. It's actually a good idea to keep it covered when you're not using it because it will catch a lot of dust in there. So you can also take an air nozzle and blow it out once a week, once a month, just depending on how often you use it. And the other piece that you want is to oil it. So this is just a little oiler from Fabric Supply. I'll unscrew that. Now our maintenance guys like to tell us every time you change a bobbin to just put a little drop of oil inside there, and that's going to keep all those moving parts nice and happy. Now once a day, once a week, you want to go through and oil the rest of your machine. This machine is marked with red paint every place that I'm intended to add a drop of oil. So it's very easy to run through and just give it a little drink. The other place we want to oil is taking this plate off the end. We'll reveal a couple more spots, including these little wicks here that like a little oil. Again, all these moving parts, when we're sewing so fast, we want to make sure that they are lubricated. So, pros and cons. Things I really like about this machine: it is a workhorse. One of these machines can definitely take you the length of a career, and you don't have to be afraid of a refurbed version, especially if you can get it from a workroom where it's been in regular use and they can tell you about the repair history and its personality quirks. In fact, this machine came to us through a series of other workrooms, and it's still really working great with a minimum of maintenance, in spite of the fact that it gets a real workout in our classes. I also love that it's a very common machine, so it's not hard to find parts, education, thread diagrams, manuals. You should have an easy time educating yourself on how to use this machine and how to repair this machine if that's your desire. And finally, the last thing I really love about this machine, especially because we teach, is that it has a top-loading bobbin. A lot of industrial machines, including the 206R, which is almost identical, except it has a bottom-loading bobbin, which has a removable casing, and it has to be snapped back in underneath. And that's just a little trickier for people to get the bobbin loaded right. It's very nice that here we can see everything that's going on. Cons, things I don't particularly like: I think the stitch adjustment is incredibly awkward. That's probably my least favorite thing about this machine. And also, it runs just a little less smoothly than the more expensive alternatives, such as a Juki 1541, that costs a little more but is going to be a little smoother to operate. And finally, you should be aware if you are crossing over into bedding, soft furnishings, drapery, if you have clients that like to bring you a lot of lighter weight fabrics, this machine does not do well with light fabrics, and most walking foot machines don't. They are designed to go through many layers of upholstery weight fabric, vinyl, leather, velvet, so they do not do well with printed cottons, linens, things like that. If you're going to be doing a lot of that, you may need to look at a different machine or a second machine that's going to handle those lighter fabrics better. But if you're looking for a good general purpose machine for upholstery, this one definitely gets 2 thumbs up from us. And lastly, I want to say, this is a general overview. You need to be very comfortable with your machine for upholstery, but you also want to find a good resource for repair and maintenance and ongoing education. There are people who specialize in machines, machine repair, industrial machines, and you are going to need to know them so that you can take care of one of the biggest investments in your workroom.